Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here to do another review on Wicked for Good Part 2. So, as many people know, the stage show Wicked is divided into two parts. One is part one, which came out last year, which we have a review on in the archives in this channel, and the other is this one. It is the prequel or the backstory to the Wizard of Oz. The Both the film The Wizard of Oz that came out in 1939, as well as the book The Wonderful Wizard of Oz that came out in 1900 by L. Frank Baum. This is starring Ariana Grande as uh, Glindola the Good Witch and and Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba the Evil Witch, and it takes place 5 years after the events of the first film. So to quickly go over before we get into it, what what quickly happened in the first film, you have Elphaba Thorpe, um, the governor's daughter, the governor of Munchkinland's daughter. She was born with a skin pigmentation problem. She was born green. Um, and all throughout her childhood, she was teased, she was made fun of because of her green appearance. Finally, her daughter, excuse me, not her daughter, the other daughter, her sister, Nessa Rose, is going to college, right? And the father has entrusted her with watching over uh, Nessa. Now, in the play, uh, she's forced to go to Shiz University because um, to watch over her sister who's in a wheelchair, right? Nessa Rose. But in the movie, that's not the case. In the movie, she just taking they're just taking her there. They're dropping her off, and Elphaba does some magic stuff. And Madame Marble, who's the head of Shiz at the school, sees that she did this, and she's like, "Oh well, we got to sign you up for it immediately." And then she begins classes. She's a star pupil, and she is roomed with uh, Glindola, the Good Witch. And initially they don't like each other, but over time they grow to like each other, especially at this one dance, the Oz Dust Ballroom, where Elphaba just outshines and she becomes a really social butterfly. They become really good friends. But then each of them go to see the Wizard of Oz. They discover that the Wizard of Oz is a fraud. They discover that the animals in all of Oz, because the animals are being persecuted. There's a history professor, Dr. Dillerman, who is removed from his position. And, there's a resistance movement growing amongst the animals to resist their persecution. And Elphaba finds out about this. Originally, Elphaba wants to go see the Wizard of Oz so that she could degreenify herself and she could become a normal person. Now her focus changes after she finds out about these animals, where she wants to liberate the animals. She wants to use her time meeting with the Wizard of Oz for something good. So when her and Glindola finally get to meet the Wizard of Oz, they discover that he's a fraud. They discover that he doesn't have any magic. He never has the ability to do magic, which is something that we as the audience we know, because we know the Wizard of Oz, the story of the Wizard of Oz. At the end of the Wizard of Oz, Toto pulls back the curtain, and it's revealed that the Wizard of Oz is just a normal, everyday guy from the state of Kansas, just as Dorothy was, who arrived there on Oz in a hot air balloon. But she finds that out too, and she does this spell out of the Grammarly, the spell book that that turns the monkey guards into flying monkeys, and they become the special spies for the Wizard of Oz because now they're they're switching the propaganda on her, saying that she's the Wicked Witch of the West because she was going to be the one to expose the wizard as being this fraud. So he has everybody from Oz hunting for her. Finally, we get to uh, 5 years after. Now she's on the run. Now she's hiding out. And also, Glindola has been accepted, and Glindola is now Glindola the Good. They're out of shiz now. Now they're out of school, and Glindola has this high post position with uh, with the Wizard of Oz and with with Madame Marble, right? And they're portraying her, and everybody, she still has her hangers on, she still has her lackeys. Keep in mind, this is Glindola, who in the first one sung the song Popular. That's all she really cares about. As a matter of fact, in the last film, when they went to the Wizard of Oz, she sold her friend out. You know what I mean? Her friend took a stance and she didn't. Her friend went against the Wizard of Oz and she didn't, right? Her friend is now on the run and she's not. She's accepted into the mainstream. So she then proposed, and there's Fiyero. Fiyero was the popular kid in school that came to shiz. He really didn't care about anything. All he cared about, he was basically like a male version of Glindola. All he really cared about was just being happy. He was brainless, basically. All he cared about is his happiness, right? So he also has a government position in the military. Keep in mind, Oz's military is hunting for the Wicked Witch. They have posters all around, everything. She's in her hideout and everything. But uh, there's a crowd of people around Oz, and Glindola proposes to Fiyero, and Fiyero is just shocked. Now, initially, this part was kind of boring. They were singing, "I'm so happy" and stuff, but you could kind of tell that Glindola was just pretending. You know what I mean? Like she wasn't really happy. They're both concerned for Elphaba. Fiyero is more so, and there's a scene where the military's out looking for her, and she's hiding. And when she goes back to her hideout, she's like, "Fiyero, you too," because she thought Fiyero was different. Keep in mind, in the first one, Fiyero was the one who helped her release the Cowardly Lion, release the lion cub that the teacher that took Dr. Dillerman's place had in the cage, and that became the Cowardly Lion, we find out later. Fiyero was the one, like Fiyero was coming around. Fiyero was starting to realize that there are things more important than your own self. And now he's the one out hunting for her. That was really disappointing to her. And plus, she was kind of in love with him, right? So, speaking of in love, we go to her sister, Nessa Rose. The father has passed away, and now Nessa Rose is now the she's the governor of Munchkinland, and Munchkinland is the last province of Oz that hasn't signed this legislation, basically banning animals. This legislation that is restrictive to animals, like segregationist registration. Because, at least of what's going on, because Nessa Rose feels like if she signs this, people will, people think she's kind of like Elphaba, like she cares a lot about the animals. So if she signs this legislation, basically restricting their rights, they'll think that she's some kind of crazy animal rights activist like her sister. And she doesn't really want that. She wants to keep up appearances. So she's the governor, and she's with Bach, her boyfriend, who's been her boyfriend basically since the first movie at the dance at the Ozdust Ballroom. And he says to her, "I think it's time to call it quits." And he's sitting there, and he looks like he's getting on one knee, and he looks like he's about to ask her to marry him. But what does he say? I think we should just see other people. I think it's time for a break, right? And she gets mad. She wheels herself out of the room. And he goes to travel. He goes to leave Munchkin Land. And now we find out that legislation has been passed that Munchkins need need passes now. He's like, wait a minute, I'm not an animal. I don't need a pass, right? He's trying to get on the train, and now Munchkins need passes. Well, this is done for an obvious reason, so that he doesn't leave Munchkin Land, so he can continue to be her servant. She's like, all right, you don't want to be my boyfriend now. You're my servant, and she's broken up because this is really the first guy ever that really, liked her and took her seriously and overlooked her disability. She's broken up about this. But while he's doing his chores for her, he notices a newspaper in her office that's saying that Glindola is getting married, because Glindola now and Fiero are officially engaged. So what is he takes the paper out, and later on he says, when Elphaba breaks into her sister's office and they're talking, and that's when Bach comes in and says he's had enough. He doesn't want to be her servant anymore. He's not even calling her Nessa anymore. He's calling her, Madam Governor, being really official, really formal. And then he's going to crash Glindola's wedding and try to get Glindola back. Because it's reminding the audience that was the real reason why he asked Nessa Rose out to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, he was always obsessed with Glindola since they were in school. And he really wanted to go out with Glindola. So Glindola said, listen, if you ask this girl out in the wheelchair that nobody else wants to go out with, if you ask her out on a date, then I'll take you out on a date. That was the initial intent. He was always in love with Glindola. He was never in love with, hey Sunshine. He was never in love with Nessa to begin with. But she is telling her sister, she's asking her sister, listen, is there some kind of spell that I could put on Bach that will make him want to be with me? Like, change his heart, basically. There's the clue. Change his heart. So that he'll want to be with me. She says there's no spell out of that. So Nessa doesn't believe her. So she wheels herself over to the book. She starts saying stuff out of the book. And her sister's like, wait a minute. You don't know what you're saying. And then what happens? First, the slippers that Nessa had on in the party, which were silver slippers. She lifts her out of the chair, and the slippers start to turn ruby red. There's another clue, right? Which is why I wore this red shirt. They start to turn ruby red, and then Elphaba gives the spell, and what happens? Bach starts having heart pains, right? And now we think, oh, he's gonna die. So she's like, Nessa's like, do something, Elphaba, save him from death. So she wheels herself out of the room, and while he's in there, Elphaba comes out and says, he'll live. He's just sleeping. So she's happy now. He's alive, and she changed his heart, she thinks. But what's really happened to him? He's turned into a Tin Man, right? He's turned into the Tin Woodsman with no heart whatsoever. So now we have the Cowardly Lion, who Elphaba encounters later on because she sees the animals are enslaved. They're basically enslaved. They're basically used to put this pet project called The Yellow Brick Road by the Wizard of Oz. And a lot of them are tired of it. They're tired of these restrictions. They're tired of all this. They just want to leave to the land beyond Oz. And there's a walkway, and she sees a bunch of animals going, and she tries to stop them. She sings the song, No Place Like Home, another clue, right? Another Easter egg. But then the cowardly lion comes out and he says, "No, she's the one that caused all this. She put a spell on the monkeys. She released me when I was just a cub. Had I not been released as a cub, I would have developed the courage to face my fears." Right? She thought she was doing the right thing by releasing him as a cub, but she didn't allow him to grow up and face his fears, which is why, according to him, he became cowardly. So they ask her, "And is this true?" And one of the animals leaving is Dulce Bear, which is was her father's, was her servant, Dulce Bear, which Dulce in Spanish means sweet. He remembers her as a kid, and he believes her. He believes that she had the best intentions. But these other animals, after the cowardly lion says that, they don't really believe it because they really they see no hope for them. You know what I mean? Because it's like we talked about with Jewish people, right? During why Zionism came to be, because a lot of Jewish people, especially after what they went through in World War II, they felt there was no hope for them, and the animals felt the same way. But she's trying to get them to resist, but they don't want to resist because they see what she's going through. She always Elphaba crashes the party a lot. There's one where she crashes the party and she writes up in the sky, which is a nod to the original because he did that in the original as well. As a warning to Dorothy, she writes, "The wizard lies and we die," which again is a nod to real life. Keep in mind this was written in 2003 during the height of the Bush Cheney administration, where there was talks about fascism. So this is the Wizard of Oz is basically a fascist. He's basically a fascist on the level of Hitler, and the people that he's targeting, or Bush was targeting Muslims and targeting American citizens. The Wizard of Oz is Hitler was targeting Jews. The Wizard of Oz is targeting animals. Right. But Glindola still has hope. She still has hope that Elphaba will come around, that they will stop all this. So, right before her wedding, she goes to convince Elphaba to have a sit-down meeting with the Wizard of Oz. It's funny we talk about that because yesterday was a sit-down meeting between two supposed enemies. So sometimes in politics, you can solve issues diplomatically and you can sit down and you can hash it out, and it doesn't have to come to blows. But so Glindola thinks that she could do that with Elphaba and the wizard. So they sit down, they sing the song Wonderful, because Elphaba's like, nobody believed in you more than I did. I went all out for you. I loved you. Like, you were my idol. You know what I mean? And then I found out you were just a fraud. Like, not only were you a fraud, you were a malicious person. So she makes a deal with him. This kind of reminded me of the Hamas Israel negotiations. Like, the Palestinian leadership making a deal with Netanyahu, he's not going to follow it. She makes a deal with him. She's like, listen, all you have to do is stop the persecution of the animals. And you have to come clean to the people of Oz that you're a fraud. He says, basically, even if he came clean, they wouldn't believe him anyway because people love to believe lies, right? He says, in where I come from, on Earth, in the real world, we have lies too. We have a whole bunch of stuff that people believe that are nonsense. We just call it history, which is true because why did Henry Ford say history is bunk? Why did Napoleon say history is a lie agreed upon? Because all we know from history is the victors. So if you won the battle or you won the war, you'll be able to tell it like you want it. And it's true with politics. Like we said this, we talked about Jimmy Carter versus Ronald Reagan, where Jimmy Carter was honest about the economic situation that we were facing in the late 70s, and people didn't like him for it. Ronald Reagan lied about it, but he did it with a smile and did it with an actor's charm, and people loved him for it. So people love to be lied to. The Wizard was right about that. You know what I mean? So, everything is all good. She came to see the error of her ways, so she thinks. But then uh, the the one monkey, the one monkey comes to her, and she's like, he gives her a key. She's like, "What is this key for?" Right? This was the wizard's servant. What is this key for? She goes, opens the door, and there's nothing but animals locked in cages. Even after he made the agreement that he would release them all, right? But he lied. You know what I mean? And then she sees his old history professor, Dr. Dillerman, there, and he can no longer speak. All he could do is bow, right? Because he's a ghost. And then you see the Wizard of Oz going behind her, going, Elphaba, some animals deserve to be locked up. So this is why I compared it to the summit between Netanyahu and Hamas, because Netanyahu said he would have a ceasefire. That's what he said. But it's just like the Wizard of Oz here. He lied because the next day he started firing at Hamas again. Like what happened? Like everything could have been so good. So Elphaba is like, you know what? I finally saw the error of my ways. The truth is you'll never change. And you need to be taken down, and I will not rest until you are. And she lets out all the animals in their cages, and they come and they trash Glyndala's wedding. So Glyndala, who is this popular girl, this dream girl, everything had always everything handed to her, a life of privilege. Now the one thing she wanted with the one guy she wanted is no longer. And Fiyero does a turn too, because the police are about to capture Elphaba, and we think, oh, he's going to go along with it because he's a high rank in the military. No, he doesn't. He turns the gun out on them, and Fiyero and Elphaba escape together in Elphaba's hideout. So we're left with two things to ponder. We're left with the fact that Glyndala is starting to realize that the way she wanted things and the life she had planned cannot be, because Fiyero doesn't love her, and the kingdom that she had was all coming unglued. Matter of fact, they had to give her the bubble that we see in the original Wizard of Oz. They had to give her that because she cannot fly. She cannot do magic. All she is an empty suit. She's an empty dress. She's like, a figurehead. She's like the king and queen of England. She's nothing really. All she does is give speeches. So she's starting to realize that. And she sings a song which was not in the play called Girl in the Bubble, which is basically about, all of this that has gone wrong. Because not only that, when Fiyero and Elphaba go to her lair, Fiyero and Elphaba start to have a relationship. Now, they take forever to kiss. Forever to kiss. They're singing and singing. Lisa and I are like, well, why don't they just kiss already? You know what I mean? Like, but they finally do when they're together. And when Glyndala finds this out, she's shocked because in her mind, she's the pretty girl, she's the popular one, she's the one who supposedly and this happens all the time in real life. When you have a girl that is conventionally attractive, pretty in the sense that a lot of people would see her as pretty. These type of girls, and we've all been to school with them, we've all known them. Some of us that are lucky guys have been lucky enough to date these type of women, but they exist in every walk of life. These type of women believe that every man on earth wants them, because majority of men are like Bach. They do want them, but these women don't want these men back. And when it is a man that is like Fiyero, conventionally attractive, and he's popular as well, people automatically assume, well, he's the most popular guy, she's the most popular girl, they deserve each other, which is a song in this in this movie. We deserve each other, right? But um, so when that doesn't happen and he goes for a girl like say Elphaba that is disabled or is not conventionally attractive, you know what I mean? When he sees something in her that other people don't see and she doesn't even see in herself, it's like, okay, well, those pretty girls get offended. That's what happens to Glindola here, to the point where they actually start fighting. Like they actually start fighting. Um, and it comes to blows. It comes to fisticuffs, which is funny because Ariana Grande looks funny fighting. you know, you know what I mean? Like they slap each other. Funny scene. But before that happens, Madame Marble is plotting, and the Wizard of Oz is plotting in a way they could destroy Elphaba. You know what I mean? Because negotiating with her, that didn't help. You know what I mean? Because now she's more determined than ever to destroy the Wizard of Oz. You know what I mean? So Glindola says, well, create a rumor that something has happened to her sister, and then she'll give this up because she cares more about her sister than anything. But they say no. A rumor is not going to be good enough. We have to make it happen. So Madame Marble, keep in mind, in the first Wicked movie, she said that the weather was her specialty. When we first meet her as Shiz, she said the weather was her specialty. So she says she devises an idea to create a storm. So she's there creating the storm, manipulating. Wow. Elphaba and Fiero are together in her lair. So they're creating their own storm sexually. And she's creating a storm, uh, uh, with the weather, you know, and it's a big tornado. And the tornado, of course, it blows Dorothy's house away. So while this is happening, Elphaba has a vision. She says to Bach, "You wouldn't believe this vision." And he goes, "What?" He says, she says, "Nessa's in trouble." She says, "How?" "A house is flying through the air." And he's looking at her like, "What? A house?" You got to be crazy. She says, "No, I have to go." And she says, "Will I ever see you again?" He says, "You mean to tell me you don't believe you believe a house is flying through the air, but you don't believe we'll be reunited ever again?" Point well taken. But Nessa, she's out there looking for Bach. She's in the right. Lisa's right. She had a vision. Exactly. She had it, which she has visions throughout the movie. Throughout both Wicked movies, she has visions. She first saw Dr. Dillerman in the cage. That's what really inspired her to want to become involved uh, with this activism. So she had a vision, and she goes, and Nessa's there yelling, "Bach, Bach, come back," you know, and the house just lands on her. Now, if it wasn't so tragic and we didn't go to sympathize with Nessa and her situation, it kind of would have been funny. You know what I mean? Like a house landing on somebody and that's how they die. But because Dr. Dillerman died, because the father died and Elphaba wasn't there for him, um, because she doesn't know if Fiero will get caught, if he'll die. Now Nessa's dying, and she was supposed to look out for Nessa. It's a tragic situation when she discovers, uh, the house on Nessa and the shoes there, right? So she's there crying, mourning her, and that's when her and Ariana Grande, aka Glindola, get into the fight. Now, and Fiero comes to stop it. He says, "If you kill that witch, I'll say that you threatened that you stood idly by while Glindola the good got killed." And he turns the gun on Glindola. Now he can't do it because he has a good heart, you know what I mean? But he gets caught, he gets beaten up, and Elphaba is having visions again of him being killed. So she comes up with any kind of spell, a spell she doesn't even know how to really do, just to save him, right? So that he doesn't get killed. Well, what spoiler alert, she turns him into a scarecrow. So now we have the three. Dorothy is in Oz. Then we have the Scarecrow exists now, the Cowardly Lion exists, and the Tin Man exists. So the stage is set for the events of the Wizard of Oz. Now we never see Dorothy. We see shadows of her. We see her walking with the Cowardly Lion and with um with the Tin Man and with the Scarecrow, but we don't see her. There's nobody that plays her. It's like background events. What we really focus on in this movie is the chase for Elphaba. Because remember, in The Wizard of Oz, the wizard said you have to bring, and he repeats it here on Wicked, you have to bring her broomstick. I have to know she's dead, right? As confirmation that she's dead. You know what I mean? You can't just say you killed her, and because then I can't grant you your wishes. So that becomes the mission. Once they go to the Emerald City, they see the Wizard of Oz. The mission becomes, as we all know from the original movie, the mission becomes now they have to, in order for Dorothy to get home, she has to kill the Wicked Witch of the West. So basically, Elphaba is on the run. She does, as the events depicted in the first film, she captures Dorothy. And the scene with Dorothy where Elphaba tells her, listen, if you don't shut up about your aunt, what's her face? I'll kill you myself. Because it's true, throughout the entire movie of The Wizard of Oz, in The Wizard of Oz, it's kind of a dig at The Wizard of Oz. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is constantly talking about Annie M this or Annie M that. You know what I mean? Annie M will be worried about me. Be worried about me if I don't come home. And it's like, girl, you ran away from home. Like you were constantly getting yourself into trouble. Like you ran away from home to escape your neighbor that threatened to kill your dog, right? And it was your own fault. Just like when you were climbing above the pigsty and you fell into the pigsty in the original movie and somebody had to get you out. Like Dorothy was mischievous. So, I mean, like she wasn't completely innocent. So Elphaba is funny in that. But they're really getting Elphaba. Like they have torches, they have like it was like fucking Charlottesville. You know what I mean? With their torches, screaming for her blood, or the end of Beauty and the Beast, right? Screaming when Gaston was leading the people to scream for beast blood. You know what I mean? Like they really want it. And then the Tin Man gets up there, he gives a speech. He says, "This isn't just about politics for me. This is personal. She turned me into this Tin Man, and then look what she did to the Cowardly Lion." And then the Cowardly Lion can't say anything, but his cowardice proves that his theory is right. He doesn't say anything about the Scarecrow. Like the Scarecrow doesn't really factor in necessarily, right? He doesn't speak anything against Elphaba, really. You know what I mean? So they sing the song "For Good," which is a beautiful song, basically about their friendship, because she's telling her, listen, this is the end. Elphaba is basically going on a suicide mission because she doesn't know if Fiyero survived. You know what I mean? She doesn't even know if the spell worked. That's why she sung the song "No Good Deed Goes Unpunished," because all she's ever tried to do was good, and all she's ever gotten was wicked results. You know what I mean? She's tried to do good to everybody, but every time she does, it messes up somehow, and she ends up with bad results, and she gets blamed for it, and things get even worse for her. She tried to save the animals, and Dr. Dillerman ended up the way Dr. Dillerman ended up. She tried to save the lion, the Cowardly Lion, and he ended up resenting her. she tried to be a good friend to Ariana Grande, but the boyfriend ends up falling in love with her, and they end up together. You know what I mean? So everything that Elphaba has tried to do has been bad. So by the time she sings "No Good Deed Goes Unpunished," it's like, okay, now I don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? Now I'm gonna embrace this wickedness. I'm gonna embrace this evil because when I try to do good, you call me evil anyway. So you know what? I'm just gonna be basically the real. I'm gonna be a real witch. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of like when Darth Vader, like after in Star Wars, when after Padme died, after his wife died, Darth Vader just didn't care anymore. You know what I mean? Like it, he just gave up on life, and that's kind of how she felt when she thought Fierro died. So, and also she's on a suicide mission. She is basically on a suicide mission. She doesn't care about life anymore. She knows that Dorothy has to kill her by pouring the water on her. This is what she's gonna do. You know, she's gonna just embrace this. And then they, like I said, they sing for good because it has several different meanings. When they first became friends in the first movie, uh, Glindola was like a conceited. She really didn't care about anybody. But it wasn't until they became friends that each one was changed for the good. You know what I mean? Each one changed in a different way. The song says, I don't know if I've been changed for the better, but I know that I have been changed for good. In other words, your friendship impacted me so much that I can never think the same. I can never be the same. Life will never be the same after I met you and after our departure than it was before I met you. You know what I mean? Because that's how important of a friendship you were to me. It's a true testament to friendship and how friends impact your life. And this is even said explicitly in the movie. But Elphaba says, you know, you're the only real friend I ever had. And Glindola says, I have a lot of friends, but only one that matter. You know, because Glindola has a lot of, right, we both cried. Glindola has a lot of friends, you know what I mean, because she's popular. And a lot of people that kiss her ass, right? She has two lackeys that famously from school, this Asian gay guy and this other girl. You know what I mean? But are they friends for real, or are they just out to be around her so that they could love her? Be her popularity rub off on them, and they're like users, right? They're not real friends. You know what I mean? Like Elphaba was a real friend because she wasn't afraid to tell her what she didn't want to hear sometimes. And it's super sad. They stuff Glindola in the closet, and Glindola has to witness her friend being killed. Dorothy pours the water on her. Now, she doesn't say the line, I'm melting, but she does scream out. And that is Margaret Hamilton's voice, the original woman that played Elphaba in The Wicked Witch of the West. We didn't know her as Elphaba then, but Elphaba's part in the original movie. And that's the end, guys. You know what I mean? And then we go into the celebration throughout Oz. That's all to do with Elphaba. And, yeah. And no, I'm not Lisa. And then they say that the Wizard of Oz has to leave Oz. Glindola finally grows a pair and steps up to Madame Marble and to the Wizard of Oz. And then we see the Wizard of Oz leaving in the air balloon, going back to Kansas. What did I think of it? What was my opinion of it? I give it very high marks. Lisa gave it, I forgot what Lisa gave it on our Facebook, but I give it very high marks. They're probably the best Oz-based movie that I've seen. 5. Okay, I give it a 8. It was very good. It was a retelling of the original, and they hinted at it too because the scene where um Fierro was talking to Elphaba, he goes, um, he says, "You're beautiful," and she says, "You're lying," and he says, "No, I'm not lying. I'm just seeing things in a different way," and that's kind of like the audience. We grew up with the Wizard of Oz. We grew up with the story. We know it. A lot of us know it by heart. We've seen multiple versions of it, including the 1939 one, The Wiz, the 19. Oh, okay. All right. All right, Lisa. Yeah, 1 out of 5, 5. Okay, Lisa gave it a perfect score. We've seen it a certain way, and we've come to see it a certain way, but this is a way of seeing it as in a different way. You know what I mean? In a different way. Basically, the Wizard of Oz was never a good guy. Oh, the Wizard of Oz was never a good guy. Not even in the first one. Not even in the original. He was always a fraud. But here he wasn't just a fraud. Here he was a malignant fraud. He was a dictator. He was a piece of shit. you know, you know, you know, and like in the first one, he was just an asshole because like he didn't do anything for the Cowardly Lion. The Cowardly Lion always had courage within him. The Tin Man always had a heart. The Scarecrow always had a brain, and Dorothy could always go home because she had the slippers on her the whole fucking time. So he just revealed as a fraud in the first one. Here he's more than that. You know what I mean? Here he is a dictator. Like he's a Hitler, a Trump, a George Bush, like a Joseph Stalin, a real bad dictator, a really bad evil individual. So and Elphaba isn't. We see her as a real sympathetic figure, which she wasn't really fleshed out in the original. You know what I'm saying? Like she was just a witch chasing Dorothy around because of her sister's slippers. Now that is uh uh Lisa says that I think it was more that the lady was being a dictator rather than Oz. Yeah, that could be true. I mean, she was sort of like the vice president. She was like the Dick Cheney. He was like the George Bush. Like he was just going along to get along. He liked the fame part of it. He liked um because this movie really didn't tie into necessarily. Yeah, yeah, Lisa, you're right. This movie didn't tie into Oz the Great and Powerful really all that much, but it does hint at that movie, that 2013 movie, where in, before before Oz came to Oz, he was working in carnivals, right? He was a carnival guy. And in carnivals, like where pro wrestling came out of, what they would do is they would fool people. That was the basis of a carnival, of those old carnivals. They would fool people. They would sell them fake potions. They would sell them fake cures. They would have fake fights. These athletic shows where a guy go up there and he say, "Oh, I want to challenge the champion," and who be in the crowd? Somebody that works with him, and he go up there and challenge him, and he fakes fights him, and he lays down for him, and they're both in on it, getting all these suckers money. That was the carnival circuit of the late 1900s. So that's basically what he was. So when he got to Oz, he could be that same faker and he could be that same con man and that same charlatan, but he could do it on a more powerful level. It'd be like if Vince McMahon became the president of the United States. You know what I mean? Like he used to be a con man, he used to be a charlatan, he used to be a carnival barker guy, but now he's more powerful now. Now he's in politics. Now he could really fool the people, right? And he can actually do something with his power. Now he'll need somebody that kind of like Trump. Trump is basically like that. You know what I mean? Like in real life, but he'll need somebody like Lisa saying, this lady that's more evil, somebody that actually knows what they're doing and that is familiar with politics in order to guide his evilness because he really doesn't know. All he cares about is the fame part of it, right? Because he was a carnival guy, a carnival barker, you know? So Lisa's absolutely right. Madam Marvel is the real brains of the operation, like in most of this. Most of the, I believe it with Trump. I believe that Mike Pence was really the president during Trump's first term, and that JD Vance is the real president right now. Like the guiding hand. Trump is the guy we see because, like the Wizard of Oz, all Trump really cares about is the fame and the adoration of the people. Yeah, that was cool. Yeah. Lisa said she liked the part when Nessa was Rose was raised out of the chair. Yeah, that was cool because that was what she always wanted. Like, um, see the magic associated with Oz can't do that because that's another allusion back to um Oz the Great and Powerful. That the chair part. Now, Wicked the play came out before Oz the Great and Powerful, so probably Oz the Great and Powerful copied Wicked, but there's a scene in that one where there's a person in a chair, not Nessa Rose, but a doll that's, I mean, a person that's in a chair, right? And she wants Oz to. This is back when he's still in Kansas. She wants Oz to use his magic to make her walk, but he can't do that because one, he doesn't have magic, and two, the magic in Oz can't do that. But she gets turned into a China doll. you know, when taken to Oz. You know what I mean? So uh, even the magic in Oz has its limits. You know what I mean? But the fact that she was raised out of the wheelchair, because that goes to the theme, Lisa, of defying gravity. The song "Defying Gravity" is really a song that is about people with disabilities. It is a song that resonates with people with disabilities because what keeps us disabled, what keeps us unable to really walk, like is gravity. So if we're defying gravity, we're finally free. Like when Elphaba finally becomes evil and she finally starts flying, she's defying gravity. When Nessa was raised out of the wheelchair, she's defying gravity. And they play Defying Gravity, the musical accompaniment of Defying Gravity, in the background as she's being raised up. But what did I think of the performances? Cynthia Erivo, tremendous. Ariana Grande, Lisa and I both said, surprised us both because Ariana Grande has several songs out that are popular songs. Thank You Next is one, right? A few others. I'm not really a fan of Ariana Grande, so that's pretty much the only one I know, but a few others. And she's been on Nickelodeon TV, but we never really knew her to sing. Now, there are a lot of people out right now like that are kind of in her category in the music business. Sabrina Carpenter, Stacey Abrams, Gracie Abrams, J.J. Abrams' daughter. They're really like childhood stars that they try to turn into singers. And nobody really takes them serious because they have no real formal training of singers. They're just up there as representations because they were child stars or whatever. But with Ariana Grande, she took this role as a way to like break the stereotypes that people say that she can't really sing, that she's not a great singer, she's not a good performer. She took this role for this reason because this is a Broadway, this adaptation from a Broadway show, and that takes range. To be a singer in a show is harder than to be a singer in a music studio. Believe me, I go to a music production school. We learn how the production of music can cover up a really bad singer. Things like auto tune, things like how the beat is, how the production is. That can cover up for a really bad vocalist. But in Broadway, that can't you can't do that. You know what I'm saying? When you're on stage, you can't do that. So even though this was a movie, the songs were written for the stage. So these songs you have to really show your range, and she really did that. She really impressed me. A lot of people say that she's the next Mariah Carey, and she really showed that that is possible, that that could be. And Cynthia Erivo, um, you know, was the star of this movie. Jeff Goldblum was good too as the wizard because I just love the way Jeff Goldblum talks. you know, I don't know, we do it like this. It's gonna be like this, and what I mean. Like he's always really nervous. Like remember in the scene in Independence Day when he's explaining to them how how to really destroy the alien ship. Uh, he was kind of just like that here, but plotting and being maniacal. Marissa Bode, who plays the part of Nessa Rose, excellent actress. We got to see more. We got to see more of her this time around than last time around. She plays a more prominent role in this one, and like she's the character I've loved since I became aware of Wicked. I've loved her because obviously I identify with her. You know what I mean? Uh, I love how this is one of the movies, and the fact that she is actually a disabled person. You know what I mean? They didn't try to pull the thing that Peter Dinklage did with little people in um in Snow White. They actually employed an actual disabled person. They always do this when it comes to right disability representation done right. They always do this when it comes to uh, actors with disability, roles with people with disabilities. Drake in Degrassi, but the character, I understand the character was different. Originally he wasn't in a wheelchair, but you know, still, the character of Artie Abrams in Kevin McHale's character in Glee, and a bunch of other places. Uh, you know, they always have the actor non-disabled in the chair, and that's cosplaying. You couldn't get away with that with black people. You couldn't get away with that with Asian people, Hispanic people. So why do it with disabilities? Like if it's offensive there, it's offensive everywhere. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things that I enjoy about it. And overall, it was a tremendous way to a different interpretation, a different way to look at um, the classic story of the Wizard of Oz. Now, um, as far as a musical winning, at least it's better than the original. Yeah, yeah, kind of. The original didn't age well because it was too simplistic. Now, technologically, it was a marvel. Technologically, because it was the first movie that was ever really done in color. So much like Birth of a Nation, The Jazz Singer, Birth of a Nation, 1915, The Jazz Singer, 1927. The Jazz Singer was the first movie with sound. Birth of a Nation was the first movie that was the first movie. And The Wizard of Oz was the first movie halfway in color. Now, that was impressive at the time, but the story was simplistic. The story was, you know, just a girl getting lost, going to a magic land, and overcoming uh, witches, the Wicked Witch of the West. And he says, I think if the backstory had put out a backstory of Elphaba, I think it would have been better, been good to compare to. Yeah, but see what changed. Star Wars changed everything when it came to movies like this, because Star Wars was the Star Wars prequels, the ones that came out in 1990 from 1999 to 2005, was the first movie to ever really look at a villain and say, well, maybe that villain wasn't born evil. Maybe he or she became evil. And then it became a trend in movies where we were looking at traditional villains with a different lens. Now, people will say, well, Gregory Maguire wrote this in 2003 before the Star Wars was doing that. No, not really. And there's always been this kind of relationship between these two franchises, because they are very much alike in a lot of ways. Because obviously, George Lucas wrote Star Wars. He was influenced by The Wizard of Oz, and then the guy Gregory Maguire, who wrote the Wicked books, he was influenced by Star Wars, as well as being influenced, obviously, by The Wizard of Oz. So they've always had this kind of brother and sister type relationship. Because think about the story, the original Oz story. A girl from Kansas who is living on a farm. She doesn't feel appreciated by her family. She just can't wait to get out of there, somewhere over the rainbow. She thinks that's so. She finally does. She's accompanied by 3 companions. One, a man made of straw. 2, an animal. 3, a tin man, and has her dog Toto. And think about Luke Skywalker. He's a kid on a farm in the middle of nowhere in Alderaan. He just wants to get out of there, but they want him to stay. But he has a rebellious spirit. So he looks up at the twin moons. He feels like, I just got to get out of here, right? And he goes on an adventure. Like Dorothy, she has Gwyndala the Good Witch guiding her. He has a good wizard in Obi-Wan Kenobi. And a wizard is what? A male witch. Right? He has his companions. He has a Tin Man. He has C-3PO. He doesn't have a dog companion, but he has a robot companion in R2-D2. He has also an animal, Chewbacca. And he has another clown type character that is with him in C-3PO. The first time my mom saw me watching Star Wars, the original, she was like, yo, that's The Wizard of Oz. So it's kind of the same story, but one is in space and one is on Earth. And one is a boy and one is a girl. So seeing as that's the case, when Gregory Maguire probably, just as Wizard of Oz influenced Star Wars, later on the Star Wars prequels influenced The Wizard of Oz. So this whole thing of looking at a villain, like Star Wars was looking at Anakin Skywalker and seeing how he became Anakin Skywalker. Likewise, Wicked was looking at the Wicked Witch of the West, seeing how she became the Wicked Witch of the West. And now that's a theme in fantasy movies all over. You had it in Snow White, you had it in Lion King. Now we're looking at the villains. They're not just one-dimensional villains. They have feelings and they have reasons and they have motivations for why they became that. And I think Star Wars really changed that. Another way that the Star Wars prequels really changed things was a prequel. Like, prequels didn't really exist before the Star Wars prequels all that much. Now you have prequels to everything. You have prequels to The Lion King. You have prequels to The Wizard of Oz. You have prequels to The Sopranos, which the fans of the show hate it. But sometimes the prequels get it right. Sometimes a prequel is hard to write. A prequel is very hard to write because you have to you have to make all the events of the past line up to exactly what the original source material is. You know what I mean? It has to line up and it has to make sense. You know what I mean? And it's very hard to write backwards. It's easy to write forwards, but it's hard to write backwards. When you're writing a prequel, you have to write backwards because you have the premise, you have the events of the first film, you have the conclusion of the first film. You have to write back from that to create a whole new story and have that story be engaging. So that's it. This movie was tremendous. But like Lisa said, a backstory of Alphabet. I don't know if L. Frank Baum even thought of that. You know what I mean? Like L. Frank Baum, his thing was his original mission, why he created the Wizard of Oz, uh, was well, for one, to make money. You know, because uh, notoriously he was an individual who he had several jobs. He printed his own newspaper. He was an actor. He was he bred chickens. He tried to do anything he could to really make money, but it was always tough for him. He even had to relocate to North Dakota for a while with his family in the 1890s because he just couldn't. Whatever he tried to do, he always messed it up. But he always had this thing where he told his kids the story of the magic land, because one time his son was about to jump out the window, and to stop him, he told him the story of the girl from the magic land. So he would always tell these stories of the girl from the magic land. Or originally it was a boy from the magic land, but he would tell these stories. And his mother-in-law, Matilda Gage, famous suffragette, she overhears it, and she had just written a book called God, the Church, and the State, where she basically challenges the conventionality of male patriarchy, of male supremacy. This was the first feminist movement in the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? And he was too a suffragette. He was a male suffragette. When he was living in North Dakota, it was just a territory at the time. He was advocating for women to get the right to vote. You know what I mean? Like in his newspaper, he was pushing for that because Wyoming, which is a neighboring state, when they became a state, they gave women the right to vote in 1869. So by the 1890s, he's pushing for it and she's pushing for it. So she overhears him telling these stories. And eventually his niece, who was named Dorothy as well, dies of cholera while they're in the frontier, right? While they're living in North Dakota. So he changes the character that he's telling the boys from a boy to a girl named Dorothy. Now, the mother-in-law overhears this, and she's like, well, we could use this story to show that women are strong, that women are courageous, that women are could be heroes too, and the girls are just as much worth as boys. So it became a feminist symbol in a way, right? And she helps them get it published, and really it was the first American fairy tale, really, because there was the other fairy tales. He was influenced by the Brothers Grimm, which are German and Scandinavian fairy tales, which Snow White comes out of, Cinderella comes out of. These all come out of Central Europe. He was influenced by Lewis Carroll's book, who came out with Alice in Wonderland in the 1860s. And that was in England. But as far as in America, there had never been a story about a female with a female protagonist. Now, witches was another thing. Witches were important because they were studying both L. Frank Baum and his wife Maud, and his mother-in-law Matilda. They were studying um, theophany, which is basically like uh, occult practices, like mystical practices. This was this new religion, like a new age religious movement. And basically, Matilda Gage makes an argument in her book that witches weren't bad, that the Salem witch trials that took place, during the colonial era in the 17th century was actually just a persecution of women, which is the standard thing we learn about now, like when we learn about um, Annie Hutchinson and how she was cast out from the Puritan colony. We learned that these things were a persecution of women, that witches weren't all that bad. It was just society coming down on witches and coming down on women because witching or fortune telling and things that existed outside of the male patriarchy of conventional Judeo-Christian religion was a way for women to be free, a way for women to exercise their freedom. You know what I mean? Because religion, Christianity was like really patriarchal, really like male centric, and women were often secondary citizens in there. So, but when they started to assert their independence, immediately the church would say that they're witches. You know what I mean? So they kind of she was kind of reappropriating the symbol of witches and say, no, witches aren't, they aren't evil people. They're just women that are independent, women that are self-sufficient, women that are feminist, we'll call witches. That was her argument, and that was his argument as well. But so he was going to show that there were good witches and there were bad witches as well. So I think L. Frank Baum, if he were alive, he would be very proud of what Elphaba represents. You know what I mean? Because she represents that spirit, and his mother-in-law too. She represents that spirit of feminists going against the system, going against the grain, going against established norms, just like he was doing when he was writing these papers against Christianity, against religion, against the religious orthodoxy. For his time, L. Frank Baum was a very liberal individual. He was, put it this way, if L. Frank Baum were alive today, people on the right, the Republicans, would be calling him woke. You know what I mean? Because he'd be the one pushing for Hillary Clinton to be the president or Kamala Harris to be the president. You know what I mean? Because he was so hard in the paint when it came to feminism. Like that was his cause, and that's remarkable to think of because, like, when we think of the feminist icons of that era, of the 19th century, sorry, when we think of the feminist icons of that era, Susan B. Anthony, Lucretia Mott, they're all women, right? We don't hear a lot about the male feminist in any iteration of feminism, whether it's first wave, third wave, whatever. We don't hear about the men, but and with good reason because most men were against it. But L. Frank Baum was for it. I mean, that was one of his biggest things that he gets a lot of praise for. And his love of animals. He was an animal activist. He raised chickens. You know what I mean? So he would be very proud of Elphaba as far as I believe what Elphaba represents as far as her politics in the movie as well. Now, the monkeys are interesting. And obviously, L. Frank Baum was a good person. He was a feminist. He was a suffragette, but he wasn't perfect. Now, the monkeys represent Native Americans. They represent Native Americans because obviously he was living in the West, in the Dakotas at the time in the 1890s, and Native Americans, they didn't want whites living there. You know what I mean? And there were clashes between white settlers and Native Americans at that time in North Dakota. So he saw a lot of stuff. So some of the stuff he said in his papers were a little what we would see in today's society, we would see as racist. You know what I mean? Towards Native Americans because of the situation he was living in. Now I'm not making excuses for him. I'm not saying that is a good thing. You know what I mean? Obviously, the excuse of he was just a man of his time. That's bullshit. They make that excuse for Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. You know what I mean? So he designed the monkeys as like Native Americans. Lisa said that when she first saw the original, she was scared of the monkeys, but that's the reason. Because Native Americans, the wild, like especially the Sioux tribe, the Lakota tribe, they kind of scared the white settlers. So that's how they imagined them. you know. But overall, the movie is excellent. Go see it with your friends. Thank you, Lisa, for contributing. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.